Welcome to another episode of Hashing Out the Law. I'm your host, Arash Hashemi. On this episode, I have William Chip Merlin Jr. He likes to go by Chip. He is a Florida attorney. I believe he's based out of Tampa. He's going to correct me if I'm wrong. He's been referred to as the Babe Ruth of Hurricane Lawyers. He's also been referred to, excuse me, as the Master of Disaster for handling uh, cases resulting out of Hurricane Katrina. But I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let Chip talk about himself. Hi, Chip. How are you?
Hey, Arash, thanks for having me on this afternoon. I live here in Tampa, but I travel all over the place. The work I do for a living is property insurance law, and our firm's got 52 attorneys. I've had a law degree out in California since 2010, just because my work tends to go wherever a natural disaster happens. So the Babe Ruth of Hurricane claims came after somebody was talking about me and they put it in a press article when they were trying to explain why some municipality had hired me up in New Jersey up there. But no, my work, just because of wildfires, earthquakes, hail damage, hurricanes, floods. It's a very specialized niche of the law, and that's all I've been doing for the last 40 years. And slowly but surely, our firm's grown, and we have 13 offices now all over the United States, and it's a fun practice. But unfortunately, because of we're having a lot more environmental disasters going on, I tend to travel a lot more and a lot side, much more so outside, just being here in Tampa and being here in Florida.
Right. And Chip, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is you represent mainly the holders who are having a conflict with their insurance company. As you know, and some of the listeners might know, we recently had the Palisades Fire. When it started, actually, you could see it from my window. I'm not too far from it. Myself, I didn't have to evacuate, but my house was in a warning zone, so we had to be ready to evacuate. I know lots of judges, lots of lawyers, lots of neighbors, friends that have lost their houses. Um, so it's fitting to have you on because I wanted to talk about the work you do, and then I think it's beneficial for the local listeners and viewers to understand what's happening. So let's go back and start from the beginning, Chip. So you decide that you want to go to law school. We'll get into that, by the way. But you become a lawyer. How do you get into the niche that you are in now?
Well, I just hated to be stuck in a law library somewhere, and I had decent enough grades to a lot of the. And I was pretty young. I did my undergraduate work in 2.5 years because I just wanted to get everything done with that I possibly can. I never really planned to be a lawyer. Been law school for an extra 3 years. I kept thinking 7 years out of my life. It seemed like a long time when you're 18 years old, when you're making a choice about what to do. But I really wanted to get and do litigation work. I wanted to be in a trial room. I wanted to do things like that. And a lot of the bigger firms that I was interviewing with said, this is back in the 80s. Well, you're going to, your first 2 years, you're going to be doing memos, and eventually you'll be able to go and assist a more senior, attorney into a hearing. And that just really wasn't appealing to me. And, I even thought about, doing criminal work because you can get really quick experience that way. And all of a sudden, I had a job offer to come and clerk with a firm that did, of all things, property insurance law, which I knew nothing about. I mean, it's not something you jump up saying as a kid, "Hey, I can hardly wait to become a property insurance lawyer," at least back then. And I took a job with them and started clerking. I found they were doing all these fascinating cases all over the country. Volcanoes blowing up, rocket ships blowing up, all kinds of crazy things that were going on. They represented insurance companies, and when I got out of law school, that's where I started off for my first 3 years. And it was a great experience. The firm was growing very, very fast. They promised me I'd be able to work on larger cases and doing meaningful work right away, which is what I was really looking for. But I started on the insurance defense side doing property insurance work there. And after a few years of doing that, I had one civil case actually two different cases representing a person that ended up having his business go before the Public Service Commission in Florida regarding the rates for a telephone line, and that worked out well. And he talked me into leaving representing insurance companies because I expressed a little bit of concern that, and I don't mean this in any way derogatory, because I have a lot of friends that do insurance defense work, and I think it's important, but I just couldn't go see my maker, saying I saved Travelers Insurance Company $25 million or something like that. I felt that there was a better purpose that I could serve by representing policyholders. And at the time, very, very few attorneys were doing this little niche area of the law. So that's when I switched over in 1985. It's been 40 years now that this firm's been going on, and we've grown. And I have a practice that I get to travel all over the United States, meet all kinds of fascinating people, and I think my work I truly enjoy, and I get a lot of purpose out of it.
Before we go more into depth about your work, let's go back. I,
Okay.
there's a point I ask all my guests who are lawyers this same question. There's a point in your life where something clicks in your mind and you say, I want to be a lawyer. When was that point in your life, and what was the event or um, the catalyst that made that click in your mind?
Yeah, I grew up never really wanting to be a lawyer. My father didn't have a great taste in his mouth about lawyers. He was in the United States Coast Guard. He became a Coast Guard officer, and I grew up all over the United States, always on the water. But eventually, right at the end of my senior year in high school, a good friend of mine on the tennis team had asked me to go with his family out blue fishing. And on a Saturday afternoon, we take off down this road and we go up to the Chesapeake Bay. And a couple miles down the road, an old man ran a stop sign and hit the station wagon that I was in into another lane, and we went head on into a VW bus. And everybody went to the hospital. I mean, everybody went to the hospital, and I was at the military hospital. Eventually, had a number of surgeries on my thumb, and I still can't straighten out my left arm from that. And it was a few months after that. Everybody else sort of had attorneys, and I kept thinking, the only people that seem to know where they stand on this thing are lawyers. And it just made me feel very uncomfortable that I didn't know what my rights were and where I stood. I didn't necessarily trust everybody. And of course, I think a little bit from my father, distrust with respect to attorneys, even though he worked with attorneys all the time, being a Coast Guard officer. I was in my very first 3 months of undergraduate school that I decided I was going to go to law school. And at least I knew where I would stand. And that was the impetus for me.
Let me ask you this. Once you did become a lawyer, I'm assuming your father was still alive and with us.
He's 90 years old, and he's still with us. Yes.
Does he still hate lawyers?
No, no, no. Now that I'm an attorney, and I think we have a lot of good debates about things. And I don't know if it was just I think every father has his dream and where maybe his son might go, and I don't think his was for me to go and become an attorney. And as it turned out, I think he sees what I get to do and how much I travel around and how interesting the work is that I do, and I think he sees the enjoyment of it, and so he's happy that I've done that. My mom was always happy that I was going to go do this, so it's all good.
Great. Now let's flash forward in time. We're back in 1985. You just went on your own. You opened up your own office. And I know you have 13 offices now, but where was your original office?
My office was at 700 Florida Avenue on the second floor of my client's, business that he had knocked out walls to put there. I agreed to be their general counsel, even though I knew that was not going to be for long in my future. But it was sort of a barter system. I take care of his legal work while I try to get my law practice up and going. And right away, I started getting some referrals from people that from public adjusters and a couple other attorneys that knew I really wanted to represent policyholders, and off I went. But I mean, it was pretty slim pickings. I'm not from a wealthy family. I didn't have much in finances except for that one client, and kind of just fell in place slowly but surely over a period of time. But it was such a different time. People don't, we take computers for granted now. We take our cell phones for granted. I mean, there was an IBM Selectric that you had there that had the carbon paper. Xerox machines were so bad back then, they would leave black ink all over your hands. People forget about all that. Fax machines were just coming in vogue. I mean, it was kind of and we take a lot of those things for granted. They almost are old today, but back in those days, that was a very brand new deal. So I think like a lot of attorneys starting off, it was me. I got a secretary that I somehow talked into coming to work with me, and I took care of my own books and things like that. And the two of us were like that for the better part of a year and a half before I think we got somebody else for enough business that we started thinking, hey, I need some help doing this. And slowly but surely the firm's grown. But yeah, very, it just like I think a lot of people start sometimes just bare nothing just about.
Right. We say when we start out here, somebody actually said this to me. We practice door law, meaning anything that walks in the door. But
Yeah.
let's hear some of your war stories. Let's hear about some of your interesting cases or whatever you want to talk about. But I'm particularly interested in your war stories, going from the second floor of your client's business to having 13 offices nationwide.
Well, I can still remember one of the first cases I had, and it was this family came in. It was a family business, and they sold clothing for people to make their own, or cloth for people to make their own dresses and suits and things like that all over the place. ABC Fabrics, and they had Pop in the business. That the only thing he and the old CFO had to do, other than play golf in the afternoon, was to make certain they had the insurance right. And this place had two separate places of business: the main headquarters, and then this warehouse that was old that didn't have anything in it. They had the clothing almost everywhere else. So sure enough, a fire happens at the main headquarters, and they go look at the insurance policy, and they go, wait a minute, this is only insured for a little bit amount. And they go, and they go, well, wait a minute, we got the addresses switched. Pop and this other guy got the addresses switched. And so sure enough, you have this huge denial of the claim. It's a complete mess. And that family hired me. I was a young punk attorney, but it was based on a couple recommendations, and it was different. I got to meet the clients, spent time with the family. We had to go up to New York City, on a number of depositions that we had to take up there, and they came with me every bit of the way. And I still remember that first really big case, involving insurance that even to today, there's a lot of good lessons to learn about spending time with your client, getting to know how they work. I always tell my attorneys today, until you spend a day with your client at their business or in their home, you really don't understand your client. And it takes time to do that. And I know in this day and age, when we just don't have time, sometimes we try to do work over computers, over Zoom, Teams, whatever it might be. Actually going and using the human touch, I think, is the proper form for most attorneys, and we forget about that at times. It's difficult, and I understand it's difficult. We have so much time pressure to do, but that first case I still have there, and there's lessons I still take, from that. And I don't know. I mean, I could tell you case after case after case we've had all over the place, and a lot of them for me go from disasters that happen. Hurricane Hugo, then in 1988, that I had to go up to South Carolina, and just living up there for a period of time, getting to have a local counsel, because that's my first big experience with being somewhere out of state, working with that local counsel and their clients up there. And my practice is a little bit different because I travel quite a bit. I mean, it's people think about the hurricanes here in Florida, but they weren't as severe back in those days. And so a lot of the severe things that would happen would be all over the country, and it could be a fire here or a fire there. For a period of time, insurance companies were denying probably 40% of the fire claims, saying they're all arson. And it was actually because of a UCLA professor, John DeHaan, that came up with a lot of work that disproved these myths about fire science that led to a whole change in the way insurance companies look at arson and things like that. But I was busy in California and all over the United States just doing a lot of arson cases for a while, based on arson cases, a myth that eventually we were able to scientifically prove were just wrongfully brought. So Katrina, I went back. We lived in the Mississippi coast when I was a kid for 3 years. And after it hit up there, I am flying up there and seeing friends of mine from way back when. I had talked to an attorney in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, Randy Santa Cruz, and Randy's law office, and everything there was just completely wiped out. All of his clients weren't there. There was nothing. And I said, why don't you join our firm? We'll rebuild an office here in Bay St. Louis. And it was the first office that we rebuilt there. His good friend and my good buddy from sailing, I raced a lot of sailboats, William Weatherly, was over in Gulfport, and the same thing had happened to him. So I said, why don't you join our firm? We'll rebuild a place over there. You guys are only 20 miles apart, but the bridge, between Bay St. Louis and the rest of the Mississippi coast, it got just knocked out. And so it was out of commission, and the drive around took about an hour and a half. So we'll just have two offices up here. And so, for a period of time, I was literally living in Mississippi. And then eventually the Port of New Orleans hired me on a case that they had, which was a big deal. Again, at the time, there weren't a lot of people that really specialized in this area of the law. And we took a claim that went from $20 million up to over $130 million in just 11 months, through some pretty significant litigation that I would literally, just to find out. And you talk about spending time with people. I remember on Monday mornings, I would get some beignets and coffee, from Cafe Du Monde, go down and talk to a lot of the guys that worked out there, the maintenance guys that would work on these 26 miles of riverfront property. Nobody really spent time. What happened, what got damaged. And on Friday afternoon, I'd bring over some Dixie or Jack's beer, and we'd sit there for another 2 or 3 hours, again, talking about the same things. What is it like? What happened? And it's, again, I keep telling a lot of attorneys, and, if you'll stop being a lawyer and start becoming a person again, it really helps to get to know the client that way, as well as the circumstances. And you'll find, facts from all these individuals that really know, what happened to things. And they're not sitting there in the corporate offices anymore. These are the people out in the field that you need to be speaking with. So I find it enjoyable. I mean, that's how you go out and win cases.
That's awesome. I do agree with you. Attorneys need to step out of the office and get to know the client and who they're representing. Now, uh, let's talk about the fires that happened here. Obviously, I don't practice in the area that you practice, so I don't necessarily know how or what questions are appropriate. So I'm going to ask questions as a layperson. So let's say my house burned down. Obviously, I'm going to file a claim with my insurance company. Um, how long do I have, or what is the appropriate time for me to file a claim? Should I do it right away? Should I
Yeah,
wait?
that's a great question. And a lot of people, ask about that. We have an office in Century City. Derek Chaikin, who's one of our principal attorneys there, sent me, says, oh my God, there's a fire. I could see the smoke coming just from even my house. This is not going to be good. And then 2 days later, there was a complete inferno going on. One of our attorneys, Rochelle, she was evacuated, and she moved in with her dog into her office for a week, and her family was moved. So I feel, for everybody that's out there, but, by now we're a couple months afterwards. The duty, no matter what kind of loss that you have for insurance, everybody's supposed to notify your insurance company right after you have a loss. That's the very first thing you do, period. I mean, I say that maybe after making certain that you're safe, but, by this time, if you had a fire, you would have been evacuated. Everybody knew, in all probability, my house burned down. Let them know. Now, this is where it gets to be a little bit different, especially for wildfires, and especially after the science that we've learned for a long period of time. It used to be, I would go out into these destroyed homes with fire buildings and fire businesses, and I'd walk around with the fire investigators and everybody, going through, and it'd almost be a badge of honor to come walking out with, soot and all this kind of stuff on your face and all that. And the truth is that stuff's very dangerous. And we learned a lot after September 11 and the fires, up there in the collapse of the building, really is a collapse of the building, about, the toxic nature of a lot of the, soot, the ash, the things that come, out from stuff. And the entire science with respect to safety has changed a lot. Fire department people now, they no longer take their turnout gear and bring it home to wash off and stuff like that, because they found that not only were they getting much higher incidence of cancer, so were their wives or loved ones that were also taking care of, washing those clothes and things like that. You don't even think about stuff like that. So, we now know it's really not safe to go back out there. And so much so, the federal government or the local officials are talking about where they're going to take a lot of this toxic soot and ash, away from there. And so I caution everybody, because I've seen some news reels already where people are out there and they want to talk to the victims, and the victims are walking around with no masks on, no nothing like that. I mean, I'm telling you, you should be in a Tyvek suit. You should have a mask on that's really a respirator type mask. This is not good stuff to have. And I think about that from my own personal experience. I said, what did I do to myself? I can't undo it now, but at least from here on out, I can warn people about it. So, after you give notice to your insurance company, it is absolutely natural, as a human, that you want to get back out there and see what your place looked like. You want to see if there's any mementos there, anything that you might be able to salvage, because it as much as there's been a financial loss, there's an emotional loss for most people. And they're looking for something, all of the stuff, all the things that we've collected, the memories, that talk about our relationships that have gone on in our life. All these things have now just vanished. And most people want to go back out there, comb through the debris, and look for some of those things, just almost anything. And that's perfectly fine. And people should do it, but you got to be safe about it. And I talk about taking boots, having on the Tyvek, suit, having gloves, have something that you just can't go back out there, because it's very unsafe to do so. But I think it's really good for people to go out there, at least if you want to go out there and try to go do it and find what you possibly can. And it's a weird thing to talk about, Arash, because then typically when I talk to especially the fire clients afterwards, or clients where their places are completely destroyed, it's also kind of traumatic to go back through it as well. And people relive it, but I think they would relive it anyway. And it's just it's a long time traumatic part of healing that I think a lot of people really never talk about. In our field, we start talking right away about, how much money is the claim going to be and what's going to happen here, versus, this whole very human thing that after you get wiped out, there's a need to get back there and see what your place and stuff looks like, and start that emotional healing, that frankly can sometimes take a lot longer to go through than getting back the money from the insurance company. But, again, let your insurance company know about things, about the loss. You want to go out there. The one thing I also tell everybody is, anytime you have a loss and you're dealing with the insurance company, get a chronology going, keep it somewhere. You're going to write it down, keep it on your computer. And what I mean is, every single person that you talk to, every single little thing you do, any things that people give you, their names and all that kind of stuff, because you won't remember all this stuff, and you're going to need to know all these names, and you're going to need to have all this chronology at some future time. Even if there's no problems with the insurance company, I guarantee you that's going to come back and help you in the future. Those are some of the first steps and tips I would talk to anybody about after having a wildfire.
I have a question for you, Chip.
Sure.
So we talked about earlier how insurance companies would deny claims because they said it was arson. And I just want to clear this up. So let's say, for example, the Palisades Fire is determined that it was started by arson. Will the insurance company use that as an excuse to deny any claims?
Only if the person who started the fire by arson was trying to burn down his own home. Okay. So it only applies if you're trying to burn down your own property. If somebody else burns it, then it doesn't matter. As the number one fire bug in Los Angeles County of all time was the fire marshal of Los Angeles County. Person would go around and set fires and see if people could figure out how he set the fires. And a lot of times they would call it arson and then blame it on the homeowner or the business. Typically, a lot of times it's business owner, and say that they were trying to burn down their own business, until it came out and they found that he was the one setting the fire. So you have and that should never happen. I mean, and the insurance company should never deny claims. It's only if you're trying to burn down your own property is that a valid reason to deny something for arson.
Awesome. Okay. Now, Chip, I'm gonna do a little commercial break. Now, people in LA, if you need to contact Chip's office, it's called the Merlin Law Group. I'm gonna give them the local number, which is area code 213-374-0416, or they can go to merlinlawgroup.com. Um, Now, let's get back to what we were talking about, Chip. So I filed a claim. What do I do next? Do I just wait for a response? What happens next?
Yeah, so the insurance company's going to sign an insurance adjuster, and that person is going to come out and typically make an appointment with you to go visit your home. Sometimes they'll make it with you to go out, and sometimes they won't. It just depends on what everybody's circumstances are. In every insurance policy, they have this one section that's called duties after loss. And that's a very important thing because it describes what the policyholder's duties are about what to go do. And most of the first thing is usually notify the insurance company of the loss. Usually the second thing is protect the loss, protect the property from any further loss. Well, if your home's completely burned down, there's nothing you can do about that. But often it's not that it's all the way burned down. Part of the place might get burned down. You got to put a tarp around it in case if it rains, the rain doesn't get, in there and things like that. So everybody's circumstances are a little bit different, but the next duty is to protect the property from further damage. And as you keep reading down the duties, there's other various duties there. One of them, depending on what kind of policy you have, is to file a proof of loss. And depending on who sold you the insurance policy, each of these insurance policies have different wording. Some of them say, you don't have to provide us a proof of loss with the estimates and all the inventory until we ask for it. And it's usually 60 days after we ask for it. But some policies, especially the ones from Lloyd's, might say, 60 days after the event, you've got to provide us a proof of loss, setting forth all these things that you've got to go do, which then you need to start getting going on right away. And California has some great consumer protection law. I'll give a big shout out to United Policyholders, which has been out in California since the Oakland Hills fires. Amy Box, the executive director. And so over the last 30 something years, United Policyholders has been very active in California in getting a lot of consumer protection legislation, out there. And one of the things that they pushed for, which is successful, is getting the insurance companies having to pay percentages of both the real property damage, 75%, 30% of the contents if you have a total fire damage claim. So they're supposed to pay that right away. And don't get me wrong, as much as I criticize insurance companies, some of them are actually paying 100%. And then they'll say if there's more, because most of them have extended or guaranteed replacement cost, they'll say if it costs more, let us know. Some are saying, don't worry about filling out the inventory forms. We're just going to pay you the money. And so, one of the things I tell people, as you go through your duties after loss, you might want to check out unitedpolicyholders.org. And they have what's called a roadmap for recovery that has all these tips from all the wildfires that have been happening and all these losses that have been going in California for the last 30 years. And it's one of the best resources that anybody can go to. And it's very California specific. I'm on the board of directors. I mean, I'll say that I give my money and time to them. I think it's a great voluntary organization. They're not looking for anything out of it other than protect policyholders. And again, that's unitedpolicyholders.org. And a lot of people can get a lot of just great information about how to handle your claim from that.
Awesome. Now, I have a question for you. If I want to talk to someone in your firm, uh, and I call the number, uh, can I get a consultation? How do I go about getting
Sure.
assistance from you guys?
I mean, you just give a phone call. For me, you can almost put Chip Merlin in. A lot of people say, Chip, why do you publish your cell number? And most people don't abuse it. I get phone calls every day from people from all over the place, and they're surprised I'll actually pick up the telephone, call them back, and certainly we have a team of people that do that. But it's really easy. We have an entire intake department, but depending on your circumstance, time is moving along in this, and we want to get an attorney talking. And a lot of time, I would say 80% of the time, we're just giving people free advice about what to go do, how to handle something, and then, with a little tagline on if there's a problem with your insurance claim, come back, and make certain you're talking to us. But every case is a little bit different. A business owner is going to have one type of issue. A homeowner is going to have a different type of issue. Your law practice got burnt out, from the storm. You're going to have a different issue, going on, and a lot of complex issues, as a matter of fact, with law practices involving business income loss and things like that most people don't even think about, because most people, including lawyers, never think about getting wiped out from something that just happened. But I can say this: every single insurance policy, until you read it, you almost have to anticipate it's going to be different. And so there used to be a day and age in the law when there was a standard policy for almost everybody that was really standard, and that's just not true anymore. The policy language has changed, their endorsements, and depending on who the carrier is, you have different rights and you have different responsibilities. So another thing I tell everybody is make certain you try. Most people, their policy burned up, so you're gonna have to get it from your insurance agent. If your house got burned up or business, it's not there, it burnt up. So you go back to your insurance agent and read through your entire insurance policies is advice. It's the same one I have to give to everybody in my field, because they start thinking they know what insurance policies say. And the more I do this, the more I recognize that the policy language is changing more and more, faster and faster all the time, as insurance companies are writing in new language that never existed, often to reduce coverages, I would suggest. And we have a lot of discussions about that. I'll be up in Sacramento in a couple more weeks talking with some of the legislators about those issues as well. We think there needs to be more, like, insurance companies are going to do that, and they need to be more honest about it. And I know the insurance commissioners in California for a number of years have been actually on the forefront, and the Department of Insurance in California has been on the forefront of really fighting, some of those issues, and still are. That's the reason why, a lot of people give a lot of grief to Commissioner, the current commissioner, but it's been going on for quite some time. There's always this battle, and if you're reading about it in the newspapers, I guarantee that's usually a good sign that the insurance commissioners not just giving in to the insurance lobbyists.
That's good to know, because everybody here thinks the other way. Now,
Yeah.
it was a pleasure having you on, Chip. I could pick your brain for hours and hours, but I know you're a very busy man. I appreciate you coming on, having a chance for me to ask you some questions, and for our listeners and viewers to learn more. If you guys, when I say you guys, I mean the listeners and viewers, if you guys want to learn more or know more about Chip, please go to his website, merlinlawgroup.com. We're going to include that in the description of the podcast. We're going to have links to his website, all his social media, to his LinkedIn. We're not going to put your cell phone out there, Chip, so don't worry about that. But it was a pleasure having you on. I hope to see you soon when you're down here. And any last word you want to say to the viewers and the listeners?
Well, I always tell people this, after a loss, and that is, don't give up. You need to stick out the course and make certain that your insurance company pays up. It's sort of like the retail concept. When somebody gives you a gift card, a lot of people, they don't use it and just lets go. A lot of times insurance companies are banking on people getting a little bit lazy and not going through everything, and it is absolutely worth your while to make certain that they do completely pay up. And if you have problems with it, you should reach out and talk to a professional about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chip. It was a pleasure, and I wish you luck.
Arash, thank you very much.